Today we have Nancy Wang with us, and she's going to be talking about advancing women, in particular in tech. She's the director of product engineering and general manager at Amazon Web Services, and she is passionate about quite a few things. She's passionate about growing early stage startups, and that's why she's a venture partner for Felicis Ventures. She's also passionate about advancing women into tech roles, and that's why she started Advancing Women in Tech and is currently in the board as well. And she's going to talk a little bit about that as well today, a little bit later. And she also serves on the board of directors of the UPenn School of Engineering Online. And you also mentor and help a lot of startups in the B2B sector. So you're doing tons, a lot in this startup, early stage, and with women as well. So I'm excited to have you here as you've been successful. You're doing a lot of things. You're very outspoken. So my first question for you is around imposter syndrome. Has that ever gotten in the way? Has it ever potentially been something that could have gotten in the way of your own career advancement?
Yeah, look, I think it's natural for human beings to feel out of place when they're the only or they're the minority, right, in any situation. And you don't need me to tell you that we are still very much, we have a lot of work to do in terms of reaching equal representation in leadership levels, in founders, in venture capitalists, any role, in my opinion, that is highly visible and in a leadership capacity. We just frankly need to do better. And so for the trailblazers in those situations who are really pushing the boundaries, it can feel lonely, right? It can feel like you are an imposter in that situation simply because you don't identify with the majority, right? So that's really where it comes from. And certainly throughout my career, at some point, I probably won't be able to say this, but for many positions I've held, I've either been the youngest, the only woman in the room, or whatever other characteristic you want to use, right? Person of color, et cetera, et cetera. And it can feel like, hey, you are representing, right? Women, or you're representing Asian Americans, or you're representing all the millennials, right? In a certain situation, simply because there are not a lot of other data points. And for folks in that situation, that's why it's so important. I can't stress it enough to build your own personal board of directors and to build a strong community.
Yeah. So it seems like you did experience some imposter, but it seems like that pressure, additional pressure of being the one who's representing, knowing that you are representing other women, that you are representing Asians and minorities and the younger people, that builds an additional layer of pressure that can be tough to deal with when it's already hard and there's already a certain amount of personal pressure when you're the only person in the room that looks like you.
Well, and that's why I wanted to change the status quo, right? So you talked about something in my introduction that I've been passionate about and has been a key part of me for the past 6+ years now, which is advancing women in tech. Which is we've taken a fairly unique approach to solving this representation problem in leadership by focusing on the cohort of mid-career women. So women who are maybe entering their first executive job or maybe their first manager or manager's role, and really focusing on that cohort and enabling them to accelerate so that they can become in a position of influence or in a more senior executive role where they can make reform level change. That's really the mission and the intent behind starting advancing women in tech as a community. And of course, individually, right? Selfishly, it's a community of just really badass women who've accomplished so much in their careers. And it's great to have that as a personal network and as a community of leaders that I can lean on and really have honest dialogues with when I do encounter challenges. And it actually brings me back to very timely, actually, an article I was reading in the Harvard Business Review around building resilience, right? Because resilience is so important because look, life is going to give you lemons, right? Not everything is going to be going your way 100% of the time. And so in those off moments when you do have your lows or something doesn't pan out the way that you think it was going to, right? You need a strong network and a strong community of people who will lift you up, right? Who will be that shoulder for you. And what better for that community to be other women in leadership roles who understand intimately what you're going through, potentially the imposter syndrome aspects that you're going through, and some of the experiences that you have as, for example, the only woman of color in a room, right? The youngest executive in a room that are making, very high pressure decisions that could impact a lot of people. And you may not have that automatic respect than, let's say, someone who does look like the majority and maybe older white male in the room. So all of that comes to, I think, the importance of having a strong community for you to lean on.
Yeah, no, it's essential. And especially at that mid-level career point where a lot of women in tech start to exit, having that community is very powerful. And so you were talking about having a personal board of directors. Do you find that personal board of directors in this community that you created? Or, how did you create your own personal board of directors?
Yeah, so it's actually a topic that I touched upon recently when I gave the commencement speech at University of Pennsylvania, because I was very honored to be asked by Dean Vijay Kumar, and I wanted to make the most of the time in the sense that what would I, as someone who just graduated, would like to hear or would be helpful for me to hear so that I can also accelerate my career as a new grad. And one of the topics that I talked about is actually building a personal board of directors, because no matter where you are in your life stage, certainly I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, but a board of directors gives you honest, advice, especially when you may not want to hear it, or especially when it's not delivered in perhaps white gloves wrap way, but it's stuff that you need to hear, right? And it's stuff that is going to be the critical, constructive 360 that makes you into a better person, either personally, professionally, holistically, right? So for me, my journey, I credit to a lot of people from, for example, I touched upon three in my speech. Tatiana, who got me into AWS, she's a phenomenal product leader, product executive in her own right. Wayne Dussault, who's been phenomenal in terms of accelerating my own career as a sponsor within AWS. And of course, Dan Scheinman, who I credit as, helping me get into venture capital and really make what is possible today, being a venture partner at Felice's, a reality. And it's really that combination of all of these people where I interact with them frequently. They give me really constructive feedback that I need to hear. And look, they take an interest in how I grow and how I develop as an individual, professional person, you name it. And it's really, they don't have an ulterior motive besides seeing me being successful. And you need people like that. And I talk about some of the ways to acquire a personal board of directors, such as it is a personal relationship to some degree. So find people that you identify with, but you also feel that comfort, right? Comfort super important because you can't, it doesn't work if you don't feel like you can be yourself around these people, right? So building a level of comfort, finding people you click with, and most importantly, finding folks who don't have an ulterior motive besides just seeing you thrive and be successful. And that's really what you need to look for in a personal board of directors. And of course, there's also legwork that you need to do as the individual to keep up that relationship. So for example, for me, I do take the onus to update my personal board of directors from time to time. It doesn't have to be every week, but maybe quarterly, twice a year cadence of, hey, this is what I'm up to. Here are the new things I'm learning. Here's the challenges that I'm facing. And what do you think, right? Or let's just get coffee and catch up. So you do have that onus to keep it healthy and vibrant as a relationship, because that's what it is, right? It's not a transactional, hey, I need this, tell me that. That's not a sponsor. That's not a personal board of directors.
And how do you go about extracting that raw feedback? Because not everybody is comfortable giving that unfiltered raw feedback like you talked about. So what was your role in making sure that feedback was coming through and that you were leveraging it as to your best capacity?
Yeah, look, people, they also have to be comfortable giving you direct feedback, right? And I know in this day and age where we tend to talk around things, we tend to sugarcoat things, it can be hard, right? Because you certainly don't want to upset the other person. You certainly don't want to come off like you're belittling the other person by giving them constructive feedback. So you also need to make sure that the person themselves are in a position, in a place where they're open to hearing that feedback. So that's one thing that you, as the sponsoree or individual, can do to make your personal board of directors comfortable in giving that feedback. So that would be point number one. I think point number two is also demonstrating that you're open to coaching, right? Because there's no point in giving you feedback if you're not going to actionalize any of my feedback. I've also shared this with my own team. And then I might as well save my breath and go take more naps, right? Because sleep is good. But if you're going to action my feedback, and in fact, you're not just going to take my feedback and incorporate it, but actually take it as a ball and run forward with it and actually show me, hey, here's I've actionalized your feedback and here's what I've done with it. Here's how I've grown myself. Like that, especially as a mentor for others, like that's what we want to hear, because it's, oh, wow, we've actually had a material impact in someone's trajectory or someone's life journey. So those are things that you can do as an individual to make your personal board of directors, mentors, sponsors comfortable in giving you more critical feedback, because that's what I find is most helpful in helping me grow. Great. I actually, as an individual, you probably know what you're really good at, but it's actually the blind spots, the spots that maybe you do know, you're afraid to call it out, or you don't want to think about it and people calling it out, that is actually most important in your career growth. So that would be point number one. And point number two is then conversely, being in a place where your mentors or your personal board of directors can actually see with their own eyes, this is the impact that I'm having on this individual. And this is why I want to continue being engaged with that individual and continue giving feedback and support to that individual, because I know that I'm having a material impact in how they grow as a person.
Yeah, and I can see the importance of taking that feedback and acting on it. And how is it that you actually make people or the mentors aware that you want to hear their raw and open feedback?
We're all human beings. And so it really comes from, is that person comfortable? So that goes from like the first meeting, even second meeting, or perhaps even third, really depending on that person, may not be the right time to ask, hey, hit me with your toughest feedback, because that's probably uncomfortable for them as well. But look, if you've built up a relationship that you've carefully cultivated, it's like any other friendship, right? If you want to make someone your friend, you're going to make an effort, right? Ask them to hang out, spend time together, take interest in their lives, right? No difference here, right? If you cultivate this as a relationship and they also get comfortable around you, then that's when I start asking, hey, are there things that I'm not doing that you think I should be doing, right? Are there things that are blind spots that you don't think I'm paying attention to? So all of these things, in my opinion, help, for example, the other person on the other end of the table also feel comfortable giving you more constructive feedback.
Oh, that's great. And you also mentioned that you got these three really great people to be on your board of directors that helped accelerate, grow your career, and get you into new areas like venture capital. You said it's important to be comfortable with these people. And often these are people that have more power, or they're in a higher position, maybe multiple levels above you. So how do you get to a position where you're actually comfortable and have a good relationship with someone that's many levels above you in an organization to then invite them to be part of your board of directors?
Yeah, certainly. It can be daunting, right? So, for example, I have a few meetings with CEOs of very large companies coming up, and I am intending on asking some of them to also join my board of directors, right? So, yeah, am I nervous? Of course. It's very human and very natural to feel that way. But at the same time, what's important to keep in mind, and this is what I remind myself as well, is we're just all people at the end of the day. And especially for individuals that I find who are very successful in their careers, they've achieved and attained very large milestones, a lot of success, right? At this point, they want to give back, right? They want to give back to what they call like the rising stars or the next generation. And so again, put yourself in a position where you can be sponsored, right? That's on you. And that's your responsibility, which is just showing that you have a high slope for growth, right? Which is, hey, you are not the same person you were last year or even 2 years ago, that they're seeing constant forward momentum and motion. One, two, being very approachable and open to coaching, because if you're not open to coaching, don't seek a mentor, right? Doesn't make sense. And yes, I have had those individuals in the past as well. And I told them exactly that, which is, if you're not interested in hearing what I have to say and you don't care to actionalize it, let's do both of us a favor, right? You clearly don't want a mentor, and it's probably not the best use of my time. So again, right, be in a position where you're open to be coaching, right? Where you're approachable, where again, you're taking interest in the other person. For example, one of the CEOs I'm meeting with next week, right? He's CEO of a very large financial services company. He shared with me that his dog recently had surgery. So I'm going to take an interest and ask probably about his dog and how the dog is recovering, and potentially even bring some dog treats, right? Again, it's not a monumental gesture, right? I don't have to go out and buy some super expensive thing, because let's face it, he has eons more wealth than I do. But it's more of, are you going to take a personal interest in that human being, right? As a fellow human being. And I think when you look at the world through that lens of, you're two human beings, right? One happens to be, sure, more seasoned, more experienced, more decorated than you are right now, but how can you contribute, right? And just understanding the power dynamics in this relationship. In fact, actually, someone on my board of directors mentioned to me, as a mentee and as a mentor, right, I will always have more to give you than you can possibly do for me. And at first, I thought that was a little bit jarring, but the more I thought about it and unpacked it, it's absolutely true. And if you understand that power dynamic and relationship, that's why you sought them out as a mentor in the first place, correct? Right? Because they are more experienced, more established, or more well connected. However, that doesn't mean, though, that you can't also give back to them. And that's the topic that I talked about during my speech again at Penn, which was compound interest, right? You're not going to move mountains the first day, but little by little, right? Like, I found projects to work on with my board of directors. We constantly met. I found ways to help them. And that's how you compound a relationship, because you don't become best friends with someone in a day or in a week just by spending a lot of time together. It's a relationship that needs to blossom, develop over time. And so that's actually how I treat also my relationships with my personal board of directors, which is, hey, how can I help you in the capacity that I'm in right now? I know it's not going to be as much as obviously you for me, but what are some small things that would make your day?
And what are some small things that you've been able to contribute with?
Sure. So, for example, let's take venture capital as an example. Finding deals, intros to founders, right? Thinking about how, for example, we can better enable partnerships or go to market or building better products, right? Those are things that you can contribute, right? Even, for example, my current position as an operator, right? That's one example. Another example, Tatiana actually ended up joining AWIT as one of our executive advisors. And in turn, we're able to collaborate on various product workshops, collaborate on various conferences, right? So in a way, we were also working together to enable us both, right, to have more opportunities to reach the community. So again, not monumental things, but it does take pre-thought, it does take intent, and it does take follow through. And that's probably, I would characterize as the most important aspect for successful mentee relationships I've had in the past, is follow through. Many people talk about a lot of things they want to do. Not everyone follows through. And it's really, I think, actually that follow through, less how smart someone is, how high IQ they have, that, in my opinion, actually differentiates someone who is going to have average level outcome versus someone who's going to have a successful level outcome, which is, if you're going to say you're going to do something, just follow through. Very simple, right? But it does demonstrate to the other party that, hey, you're committed, right? You have perseverance, you have passion, and most importantly, you actually care about what you say you're going to do.
Oh yeah, follow through is key. What are some of the other characteristics of your favorite mentees?
Yeah, again, right? It's one of my board of directors, actually, Wayne, told me, which is still sticks with me, which is, they need to want it more than you do for them. And it's so true, because reaching new milestones, getting to promotions, raises, new knowledge, whatever you want to mark forward progress with, it's like climbing a mountain. And one way to climb that mountain, sure, can be your boss, your sponsor, whoever, pushing you up that mountain. Can you do it? Yes, but it's painful, right? Every little step, you have to push them there, right? Hey, do this. Hey, go after this. Hey, have you thought about that? Versus the most successful candidates I've seen, right? They want it themselves so badly, where they're like, I really want us to climb to the top of this mountain, right? Sure, you can give me some boost, but I'm going to do most of the work. I'm going to do most of the work ascending that mountain. And it's those candidates that will go the farthest, right? Because they truly want it for themselves, not because you want it for them. So you can give a little push, but they'll run the rest of the way. And so how it manifests in a mentoring relationship is, sure, I can talk about how they can better structure their ideas, right? Maybe present. And they'll come back in a month or two and actually give me an update. Here's how I incorporated your framework into my presentations. Here's the feedback that I got. And here are the next steps and the projects and initiatives that resulted from that presentation. And here's what I'm doing with them. That's so powerful. And that's what mentors, that's what gives the mentor high as well, which is, hey, I'm giving one piece of morsel of advice and you've taken it the extra mile. And that makes whoever is your mentor even more engaged and interested and excited to help you.
I think that's a great illustration and feedback that you got and that you use with your mentors and with your board of directors. What are some of the other ways that you've advocated for your own career advancement that made a big difference for you?
So I would say it's knowing yourself, right? And being true to yourself, because oftentimes I think early on in your career, you can feel a lot of pressure to conform to something, right? As in, oh, everybody in this company is this way, so therefore I must be this way. In fact, actually, I remember myself when I first joined the first tech company out in Silicon Valley. I saw everyone wearing sweats or very casual clothing. And I had just moved from the East Coast where I was more used to, of course, dresses or suits. And I thought I needed to fit in and look like everybody else. So I actually remember going to, at the time, Lululemon and buying a completely new wardrobe, but I just didn't feel myself, right? I like to dress up. I am, I guess, what others call very much a girly, and I just didn't really feel myself in that environment. And later on, I realized, of course, you have to act in a way that is, again, true to your personality. And so for me, I'm always going to be more on the entrepreneurial side. I love startups. I think everyone who knows me knows I do, right? Working with them, just really engaging that founder hustle and energy. And I love, for example, growing things, whether that's growing teams, growing products, growing revenue, growing customer base. That's really where I excel and really thrive, right? Putting me in an environment where those things might not exist will probably not be the right fit for me. So again, understanding who you are, where you excel, what you love to do, that is also a big differentiator in at this point where I see kind of people who accelerate and people who may not accelerate.
And how have you discovered yourself and what you really want and the kind of environment that you thrive in?
Just trial and error. I don't have a perfect recipe. Sure. I do think that taking, for example, personality tests or emotional intelligence tests like Myers-Briggs or others can help you understand your natural tendencies. For example, if you were to break me down, I'm obviously very, very type A, very organized, very goal-driven. That's me to a nutshell. But okay, how does that manifest in the workplace? And so I think it is certainly by doing, trying, and learning from your mistakes, right? Which is, okay, am I the person to focus on, I'll give an example, the here and now, and maybe the next month or two, and breaking it out into small milestones? Or am I the bigger picture person that's going to think 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years ahead and map out what our roadmap is to get there? I'm certainly the latter. Can I do the former? Sure. If push comes to shove, I can do it. But is that an area where I'm really going to relish and have so much fun and thrive? I'm not, right? And so I think I think a lot of people say tongue in cheek, right? If you love what you do, it doesn't feel like a job anymore. I think that's a little too simplified, in my opinion. However, the morsel of truth in that is if you find what you love doing about your role. And for me, that's growing leaders. For example, that's also growing businesses, doing the 0 to 1, 1 to 100 journey, right? if I can get to do all those things, it's fun for me. Sure, will there be late nights? Yes. Will there be weekend work? Yes. Will there be sometimes projects or initiatives that don't pan out? Yes. But overall, if you can align what you do for work to where you thrive, where you really enjoy doing, then that adage does become true. It's no longer a chore. I think that's the key point. It's not a chore of, oh, it's another late night at the office, but instead it becomes, you know what? I get to really grow this business from 1 to 100 and get our first 100,000 customers. That's exciting. And sure, is it going to come with long hours? It might, but you truly understand. And most importantly, you agree with the purpose of what you're doing the long hours for.
That's very fair. Do you consider yourself outspoken or assertive? And has that helped you in any way to be able to push your career forward?
Yeah, I guess if I were being tongue in cheek, there is a business leadership article about how more disagreeable people tend to be in higher levels of leadership. Again, in everything, there is a morsel of truth in that. So the morsel of truth in that phrase, for example, can be you have to have backbone, because especially the higher up you go, there's so many times, and probably more times in the day actually now, where I say no to things than when I say yes, let's go for it. And the reason for that is time is precious. Even when you have 100% org, 200 people in your org, time is still precious. There's always more things that you want to get done than you have time and people for. And so when you commit to everything as a leader, then you are doing a disservice to your people and to also you, because you are going to lack that focus. Versus if you agree as a team and you as a leader understand, hey, this is direction that we want to go towards, and we're going to deprioritize or say no to specific things that don't mesh up with that ultimate goal. That's where I think you're going to get the most ROI, right? So that's where one of the Amazon leadership principles is have backbone, right? Disagree and commit. So the first part is have backbone, right? You have to stand up for what you believe is right. Even if sometimes that makes you unpopular, even if sometimes the entire world, it seems, disagrees with you. But if you believe you are right and you can back that up with data, with assumptions, with metrics, right? We're all in a data-driven world these days, right? Stand up for yourself. And that's really where I think the true metal of leadership comes from, is if you're willing to be that unpopular person in order to stand up for what you believe is right.
I like that. I like that backbone thinking. Definitely very important.
Yeah, and that's one thing I've worked with a lot of the women mentees, both in the org, in the company, and outside the company, is really that backbone piece, because it's scary. And I'm the first to admit it can be really scary when you're standing in a full room with people who are maybe a few decades older than you, who don't look like you, who don't identify with you, and you're proposing a counter opinion to what the majority thinks. It can be very scary, and the path of least resistance and the easier path is just to not say anything. But if you truly believe, and this is where another Amazon leadership principle comes in, ownership. But if you truly believe that you are right, it behooves your ownership to say something about that. And that's one thing that I've worked on actually with quite a few of my mentees, is having the courage, right? Because it does take a lot of courage to have the unpopular opinion, to push back, to disagree.
And it seems like you personally have a lot of courage in different areas where you've been inserting, disagreeing, asking for things for advisors and following through. There's definitely a lot of courage there as well. And from your experience with the AWIT and the women there, what do you see are some of the areas where women in tech tend to struggle the most when it comes to advancing their careers?
Yeah, the numbers tell it all, right? Again, you don't need to take it from me here, but we all know that when women start out their careers, and that's your entry level product management job, maybe your entry level software engineering job, we're almost equal at this point, right? More women entering computer science classes, getting engineering degrees, entering the tech fields. And while we're not at 50-50, I think we're pretty darn close. With that said, when you, let's say, fast forward though, 10 years, 15 years from there, and these people become senior engineers, maybe managers of managers, two things happening. Either they completely exit the workforce together, or they go to part-time, or, for example, the promotion train seems to grind to a halt. And that's what the numbers say. But then the questions are, why is that the case? And again, a couple of reasons, right? There's not a surprise that Michelle Obama is out there being quoted saying the most important thing you can do for your career is who you marry, or I would take that probably one step further and say who you decide to surround yourself with, right? Because if it's folks who are striving, who want to reach that next level, or who are growth mindset, then you're naturally going to develop a growth mindset. Likewise, for family support, right? Especially women do bear the brunt of having kids and being the caretakers of the home. Do you have a good support system where you can lean on your partner, spouse, siblings, family, parents to help you with some of that workload, right? And those are all very important things that will impact whether or not someone decides to stay in the workforce, stay full-time or not, because at some point it does become a numbers game, right? And by numbers is numbers of hours, just like the book says, is if you put 100,000 hours into something, you will become an expert. Because at some point, especially if you're in a leadership role or managerial role at a top tech company, you're very smart, right? You're clearly very smart to have already made it there. So at some point, it is in hours. So are you present? Are you delivering results? Personally, I don't believe in FaceTime or butts and seats time is what I call it with my team. I understand. And that's actually one thing that I'm very proud of is my team has quite a few working mothers, people with small children, also working dads. And the reason why is I tell all of them work-life harmony, right? Bake your work into your life. If you need to leave early to pick up your kids, go for it. If you need to start the day later because you're dropping off your kids, that's something just factor into your schedule. As long as you achieve the results, I don't care how you get it done or when you work, make it work for you, right? But ultimately, though, however, it's still that results aspect to index on, which is if you compare two profiles, strip them of gender identity, everything else, and you only measure on results, it's still the results. So that's, again, where we have to work through, right? Do women at the stage where they make that inflection in their career path have the correct or the right support system to be able to achieve those results?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the benefits of women in leadership positions, because they understand that and can bring that to the team as well. And what are some of your final considerations when it comes to advocating, advancing your own career as a woman in tech?
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the things I back to that growth mindset and compound interest, right? Rome wasn't built in a day and your career will not be built in a day. It's a lifelong journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint, is continue upleveling yourself. And for that reason, that's why Advancing Women in Tech has put out over 100 hours of self-paced instruction that you can find on Coursera. So if you Google www.awit.org or www.coursera.org/AWIT, then you'll find all of our actually course and specializations. So specializations are actually where you can get course certificates. And ours have been accredited by the American Council on Education for post-secondary credits, which is something that I'm a big believer in. As Ivna also said in the beginning of this podcast, I'm on the board of directors for Penn Engineering Online, which again provides more accessible mediums for people to acquire a quality education and a quality degree. So you really can't beat the deal. $79 a month on Coursera for 6 college credits is what AWIT can do. And so there's 3 specializations you can check out right now. Real world product management, which essentially covers all the business, technical, and also interviewing tips that you'll need to become a product manager in a tech company. And 2, the real world cloud product management, which is how do you PM a cloud product? And then finally, our most recently launched specialization is a real world engineering management specialization, which is how do you become an engineering manager? How do you become a technical program manager? And so between these 3 specializations, we've been very fortunate to have tens of thousands of learners around the world take these courses. They've been localized as well to Spanish for our South American and Central American students. And it's just really great to see students posting on LinkedIn from, for example, Nigeria, countries like India, countries like El Salvador, Brazil, saying how just helpful they found these courses to be. And that's the sole reason that we've put this out there, for these courses to be helpful and also for individuals to be able to upskill their careers.
That's a wonderful initiative, and congratulations you and your team for achieving that. It's a big help for a lot of people that are entering that career. And thank you for sharing so many of your insights around leading and advancing one's career, and also creating and managing and leveraging our own board of directors for our career success as well. So I appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on, Ivana.